Welcome back, everybody. Derrick Soo, your 2022 Oakland mayoral candidate. Well, this week what we're going to be doing is exploring and making changes to our solar system that hasn't quite worked out the way that it was intended to. And we found some problems. Number one, we found that the MPPT regulator controller for the charge coming off the PV panels isn't an actual MPPT multi-point power tracking controller. Instead, it's a PMW, which is pulse width modulation type of regulator. Very inefficient, and in fact, right now I've documented 40% power loss between the solar panels behind me and that MPPT tracking unit and the battery. And so what we're going to be doing, number one, we're going to bump up the voltage. What we're going to do, we're going to change how I have these wired right now, which is all in parallel. It's the simplest system, but what we're going to do is change that to a series and parallel type of connection. And so we're going to go from 18-volt system up to a 36-volt system. And then that MPPT controller that we have is supposed to be able to convert everything back to just wattage. And wattage is the most important thing. We just went and ordered and received the new wattage readers. And so what we're going to be doing is plugging those in and getting actual readings of what the demand is here. Because we've got our refrigerator, and we're going to see what the demands are when it's idling, and then when it's working and cooling the refrigerator. So we're going to do that. We're going to get readings from our coffee pot, readings from all the different things where we don't have an actual wattage number. Because what here in our current system, most people are accustomed to reading and planning based upon amperage. Amperage is volume, and that's kind of like picture in your mind a pipe, a very small pipe. Let's say 1 inch. You're going to get only so much water out of a 1-inch pipe. Whereas we double that to a 2-inch pipe, now you get about 4 times the volume. And so that's what we're going to be doing essentially with this. We're going to be bumping from 18 volts to 36 volts and then causing more pressure and volume. Even though we still have the same watts, we're trying to push the voltage to trigger that MPPT controller to allow the volume, the current, the wattage to go into the storage battery. Because here's what's been going on. In the mornings, I'm having to run my generator, and the generator is hooked to a battery charger. Battery charger puts a charge onto the battery, puts in approximately 400 watts into the battery at a time. And so that 400 watts brings the battery charge up to between 14.2 and 14.4 volts DC. And what we've been noticing is that once we stop the generator and the battery charger is turned off, what should happen, that MPPT controller should maintain between 14.2 and 14.4 volts DC throughout the day. It should never drop below 14 volts unless it's really cloudy out or it's raining. So we haven't had any of those situations here, and so that's telling me that there's a real problem. That's indicative of a real problem with the regulator controller. And so we're going to be pushing that. We've ordered a new MPPT controller, a real one, and then and how we know that it's a real one, I've done a little more investigation, a little more work on this. The reason why I went with this real piece of junk here to try it out, it was something new I hadn't seen before, and I didn't know about its internals, but the price point was very low, was $30, and said it would do everything that an MPPT does. But we found and verified that that's a lie. Amazon doesn't watch their products. They don't have any guarantees on the performance or if it's actually what it claims to be. And in this case, it's just downright fraud on this, and it's not made by an American company. It's an imported piece of junk. And so we're going to work with this until the real actual MPPT controller arrives. Also arriving at the top of the month will be 2 more PV panels. So we'll have a total of 6 that we're going to be putting up. Also, I'm going to make some corrections up here. We've been having some shading issues. So I'm going to spread the PV panels out a little bit and tie them in such a way where they're not likely to slide, move, and wind moving the roof there, changing things. So it's going to be a little more stable, and we're going to deal with and address the shading issues. Shading means that there's a section of the panels, the actual panel portion that absorbs the light to create the electricity. If it gets shading, what happens is that the voltage drops down from that panel. Once the voltage drops down, that panel gets excluded from the line, and so your total output drastically drops. In fact, it drops by the whole panel. And so that's one of the most important things that you have to address, the shading. Also, we've been noticing that once again, you remember on the last episode, I cleaned up the surface face on these, and once again, we've got a lot of buildup. There's a lot of fallout. Air is very dirty, and so we're going to be cleaning those panels once again before we put it back into operation. We're going to be switching the wiring to a parallel series or a series parallel system to up the voltage from 18 to 36 volts. Then we're also going to be replacing the MPPT controller. We're also going to, over the next week, build a terrace where the actual panels will sit on top of, and it'll provide kind of a canopy effect here, which will be shaded. Then we're going to add in an infrared heat collector for heating hot water. So we'll be, that's another episode that's going to be coming up here shortly. So you want to stick around and watch that one. That one is really interesting. It's eco-friendly. It takes approximately $150 worth of parts, a day or two of assembly to create this heat collector for our hot water system as we move along. And we'll be testing this out. And that's something that we're going to be incorporating into all of the tiny homes that we're going to be putting here in October. And so you want to stick around and really watch the results on that, because it's absolutely fantastic. And we're going to build it right here on a video for you to see, and then we're going to test it out. We're going to show you the water temperatures, everything. And so it's a lot of exciting new things coming up here in the future, along with Conestoga hut tiny homes that we're going to be putting in here for the senior ladies. I myself, I'm going to be redoing my shelter also, and it's going to be ending up around 260 square feet, somewhere thereabouts to 300 square feet. I'm going to be incorporating not only my bedroom, we're going to incorporate a shower bathroom. We're going to also incorporate a mini kitchen, and it's all going to run off of 8 PV panels for the electricity. It's going to go into a battery storage bank of 4 industrial batteries to hold the energy. And so what the goal is, what should happen when the system is properly designed and properly functioning, in the early portion of the day, like it is right now, you bring the battery all the way up to 14.2, 14.4 volts DC, because when you switch the system on like I do in the morning, about 6 in the morning, the system typically is idling right around 12 volts, 12.5 volts, which is a typical battery. It's also at 12 to 12.5 volts, indicating that while it has a charge on it, it is not a full charge. In fact, it's nearly depleted, because once the battery goes below 12 volts, that's essentially a dead battery, and it's not going to have a whole lot of charge. And so once we get it up to 14.2, 14.4 volts, it should stay there all day. All day. It should never move off of 14 volts. And that's not what's happening right now. In fact, what you'll see is that once I turn the generator off behind me, that the voltage immediately drops to 13.5, and that shouldn't happen. And that's because of that cheap pulse width modulation regulator. And it's causing a grounding effect to empty what it reads as excess voltage at 13.5, or between 14.2, 14.4. It quickly drops it to 13.5. If it was in a vehicle situation, that would be indicative of a fully charged battery, 13.5. But then the sad part is that at 13.5, it continues to go down throughout the day. Even with the sun shining properly on the PV panels behind me, the voltage drops down to where the batteries are nearly dead, literally, and that shouldn't be happening. So that tells me that cheap regulator isn't working, and it's not working properly. It's maintaining a 12 volt to 12.5 volt charge on the battery so that it doesn't kill it. But the problem that we have at 12 to 12.5 volts on that is that these batteries, the way that they're constructed, starts damaging the cells of the battery. And so it drastically shortens the life. And in fact, I've already noticed some decrease in capacity on this one. So I may be replacing this battery, the test battery, with the new one when I get the regular battery bank delivered. So I have 4 fresh batteries to operate with rather than 3 fresh ones and one that's having issues. So stick with us. We'll be right back.